Today we have Angela McKinney from the IEP Technical Assistance Center. We have Mindy Cooley and Tendra Duff, and they are actually TheraPlay moms and special ed parent advisory council. And then we also have Michelle Jones, who is a special education liaison for InSource. So they're going to give us some good information today. Whoever wants to get started.
Did we have Michelle as the first?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Did we?
Go ahead, Michelle.
InSource, Article 7 and all that.
Yeah, all right.
And Tinder, I can, we'll,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So you want to move it so they can see me?
I can actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
They should be able to
So
see
I
you.
think her camera is set. So how do I,
Technical
There's our
difficulties.
just so you guys don't have to sit there and stare at yourself all the time. If we do speaker.
There. Oh, yeah, that works.
Okay.
I like
I'll
that.
switch to whoever's speaking.
Okay.
Cool.
And did you already send the links to them? chat?
I did. Stephanie did not get one, but I'm gonna send it in the
Okay.
chat. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So in the chat, there's links,
Mhm.
and then you've got like the scan, so you can kind of do those on there. But
Yep.
just a little bit about InSource. We are a parent training institute, and we are there to kind of help parents. We started back in the 70s, and it was basically parents that started this. And so all of us that work for InSource, we all have a family member that has been through the process. So for me, my daughter has a 504. She's had it since she was in 3rd grade. And so we kind of work through the 504 process. But everyone that works at InSource has been in that situation. They've kind of been there. They've kind of gone through it. So that, we're kind of here. We've been there. We're still going through it ourselves. And so that's kind of part of what we do. We are liaisons. So when we say that we're liaison, we're there to help kind of bridge the gap and kind of help people work together. When you think of an advocate, advocates come in to defend. We're not there to defend. We're there to just keep the collaboration between everybody. And we are there for the child. We want to make sure the child's getting what they need with the IEP or the 504. And so we just want to make sure families understand that we are kind of there to kind of help collaborate. Because in the end, everybody needs to work together because you're a team. So that's kind of InSource. And what we do trainings for families. We can come to presentations. We can go to meetings. We can look at documents. We can kind of help find resources. There's everything out there that, we get calls all the time for waiver and all kinds of different things. So we can hook you up with parent support groups and things like that too. So that's kind of what we do. The information that she sent you was Article 7. So that is the laws. And that's kind of not for fun reading. Don't ever sit down and just read it. Oh my gosh. When I started there, they were kind of like, you got to read this and this. And I'm like, I can't. But I eventually got through it. But there is an index. So you can kind of use that online. You can use the Control F. And if you want to look at transportation, I know transportation seems to be an issue sometimes. You can do that. Navigating the course is a summary of Article 7. And I encourage everyone to take the time to read Navigating the Course. There's a lot of good information in there, and it just kind of summarizes the idea behind the special education process and kind of how that works. So that's what the Navigating the Course is. I did also send information on 504s. 504s are different than IEPs. And so sometimes we get those calls from families that say, I want an IEP, but the school's saying they're going to give me a 504. So I just try and make sure families understand a 504 is accommodations. That's truly what it is. They're just there to kind of provide additional support for your child if they're in a general education classroom. That doesn't mean they can't get some special education support, but a lot of times that's if they just go to the resource room because they need additional time for a test or if they need something read to them. It's not really minutes and supports and services, and that's what an IEP is. An IEP is basically you're getting a support, a service, and I always tell families those are linked to minutes. So when you see minutes on a plan, that's what your supports and services are, and it has a goal. 504s don't have goals. 504s are just kind of there to help kind of boost the kid a little bit so they can kind of get through that. So I also put some information in there about 504s so you can kind of have that information. And then the last link that I had in there was just what to know when you go to a case conference. What are some ideas of who needs to be present at those? You always want a general education teacher there. They can bring great information. You need your teacher of service, your teacher of record. They're usually a lot of times the same person. You need a PAR there. That's the person that's basically going to make sure that IEP is implemented and put into place. So that's kind of on that link as well. that kind of gives that information. So that kind of in a nutshell kind of gives you an idea of who we are, what we do. Like I said, you are our liaisons. In this area, I serve Hamilton Heights and Westfield. So I do not serve Carmel schools. That's a different liaison. But if you do need that person, we can make sure that you get hooked up with them and have any questions you have. But down in this area, Hamilton Heights, and I do Westfield, and I also do Sheridan. And then I kind of go north all the way to Pioneer, which is in Cass County. So I have Grant County, Tifton, Howard, Hamilton, Miami. Yeah, I have a pretty big area. So that kind of gives you an idea who I am. So who is next?
I think
Okay.
Angie was talking
Yes,
about
she
facilitated IEP.
Okay.
Well, my name's Angie McKinney, and I'm a technical assistant specialist with the IEP Technical Assistance Center. And we our main role is to do training and support to schools for things related to special ed, but also things related to all kids, because we know when we do better for everyone, we do better for our special populations as well. So we're always looking to improve things like IEP rating, doing functional behavioral assessments and behavior intervention plans. I do a lot of training here and there on intervention services and things like how to provide more related services and things like speech therapy, which is a primary service, in an inclusive setting. So instead of pulling kids out, let's do it in the classroom where kids and teachers get to see all the good models and see the magic, right? So that we're doing things all day. But another service that we provide to the state that is not part of the law is a facilitated IEP. And so you guys may have experienced meetings that weren't so fun, where we're butting heads. And one of the things that we can do is send one of our team members in who have no stake in the game. We're a completely neutral person, and we can facilitate the process. We don't facilitate anything related to content. I don't know the kid. I don't know the situation. So I can't give input onto goals and services, but I can help walk everybody through it who does know, who knows about this specific student and what their needs are. So when we do this, it's at no cost to the parent or the school. It is only going to happen if both the school and the parent sign off on a form and say, we agree to have somebody else come in, because essentially we're going to get to hear confidential information. And so we have to have parent permission to make that happen. But we just come in and help manage the people, right? The adults are usually the problem, quite honestly. I mean, when it comes to meetings, because we all have opinions and they are always the same. So having somebody who really doesn't have a stake in the outcome can be there to just help everybody through it. We use an agenda, we use ground rules for the meeting, and for the most part, we have pretty good success. We have a few exceptions here and there, usually when we are facilitating a meeting right after a due process, or if there are a lot of lawyers sitting around the table. But I don't think it could go much better at that point, things are already kind of rough. But I left I know you guys are, for you guys who are out there, I have some things that I'll just leave here, so that if you ever want to pick them up when you're here. I have a brochure on our center, as well as some help sheets for parents and understanding things related to that evaluation, like understanding test scores and eligibility areas, because sometimes your eligibility areas aren't the same as your child's diagnosis. It doesn't always line up perfectly. And then if you go to our website, there is an FIEP tab, and that's how you request this. There's a link to request it formally, but then there's also a link to the actual form that both the school and the parent need to sign to make it happen.
So you, Angie, did a really great presentation on the in-source office. Was it office hours or was it a special?
last week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I loved how you explained, when to ask for a facilitated
absolutely.
IEP, because you don't necessarily need one, but it's a service that you need to determine if you should reach out and get it or not.
And it's usually when either there's been some bad blood, right? There's been a history of meetings that just didn't go very well. Or sometimes it's those situations where I know my child has such complex things going on, medical, academics, behavior, I mean, the whole package, right? And maybe some outside therapies and services where you're gonna have other adults that are part of this. When things get really complex, it's hard for somebody to run the meeting that knows about the student because they're mixed up in both the content of what we're talking about and trying to manage the process. And so having an outside person can be really helpful in those situations. We can use it preventatively, but for the most part, when things are going well, let them keep going well. And when they're not, rather than jumping to due process or something that costs money and uses a lot of time and creates a lot of hard feelings, facilitators an easy, free way to try before moving to that next step.
And I think that's a good point, because a lot of times, sometimes if there is conflicts and you keep reconvening, if a family does file a complaint, sometimes they'll ask if you've tried facilitated. So
Yeah, the difference is in Indiana, it's not a requirement to do. It's
Right.
nowhere in Article 7. It's just a free service. There are other states that require you to do a facilitated IUP prior to moving to that next step.
And speaking from experience, I can say if you come to one IEP meeting where there's any kind of disagreement or friction whatsoever, don't hesitate. Just ask for a facilitated IEP meeting the next time, because it can, then there's not as much friction between the two parties, and then it's not he said, she said, that facilitator can kind of keep that level ground amongst the two parties. And then if you come out of that, then you're still having issues, then you know that at least you did the best that you could do to prevent that from happening by having that facilitated IEP meeting. Now that facilitator may not always resolve things, but a lot of times they can. So anytime if you have one IEP meeting and you seem to have those disagreements or you're butting heads, don't hesitate to go into that facilitated IEP meeting, because they can be very helpful.
If you feel like you don't have a voice, and I think a lot of parents get in that situation where school knows school stuff, right? Therapists know therapist stuff. And usually they're more well-versed in the law, and parents come in at a terrible disadvantage and a lot of times just pretty much remain silent. Or if they do try to speak up, they're shut down. And so, we sometimes get requests from parents for that reason. I sometimes get requests from somebody at a school that says, the other people at the table won't let me talk, everybody needs to have input and a voice. If not, they shouldn't even be at the table. I mean, there has to be a role for everyone that's in that meeting.
And the parent role is huge.
Absolutely.
I mean, we are
Primary teacher.
we're the most consistent player on the IEP team. So we have a lot of input that we can bring. As Tendra and I entered the world as parents into the whole special education process, it was like, woo, there's so much information. Article 7 and what's your eligibility category, and all of the different pieces that flow into it, the parent rights. And so as we were getting to know one another through this process, she had already done your kids are older than me, so she's a step ahead of me in learning. That CPAC stands for Special Education Parent Advisory Council. And it is something that is recommended by Article 7, but in the state of Indiana, having a council like that within a school district is not required, but it is recommended. So you can find that in Article 7. I don't remember exactly. I should have had that.
I go to my computer, I can find it.
Like in Freddie Plainfield, she knows where it is in Article 7. But that just like what Angie and what Michelle are talking about is another way for parents to improve the outcome for their child. IDEA in Article 7, it's like a beautiful passport for your kid to access their education. So then we get the passport, so then we got to fill out the passport. And so CPAC we see as how we run it in Westfield. We have been doing our parent advisory council for almost 2 years now. And we really focus on two things: educating the parent, making sure that they are as prepared as possible to, be a player at the IEP table. And then also connecting them with resources that they need to be able to do that. And we also work on finding those systemic things that are going on in the district that need more parent input. So in working with parents, we find out what's going on, what the needs are. And then we have a whole council of parents and teachers that collaborate together and sit in a room and discuss these things. And so far, we haven't had a whole lot of big, changes that we've made with any systemic issues, but those things are starting to come. But right now, what we've really been doing for the last couple of years is building our rapport within the district. Because that's, I think, the main thing, if I were to say to the parents tonight, get to know your superintendent, get to know your special education director, get to know your principal, or your assistant principal. One of those two people within your building, in your school building, is usually your PAR, the public agency rep. They sit in your IEP meeting and they take notes and they, make sure that the IEP is put together and implemented. So getting to know the administrators as well as your teachers. Something that I do weekly is I send information to my son's IEP team about what they're doing at home with fun pictures and stuff. So it really, just keeping that information flowing between you, because then I'll get a reply back and, we'll have little conversations in the hallway. So we keep that conversation going, keeping that communication going. So then when I have a need that I don't see that's being fulfilled, I can go to them and more likely you'll be, accepted with what you're asking for.
Yeah, and then, we have these three processes. We understand that's not always going to work for everybody. There's always somebody at some point, you try your best. And then as a parent, you're like, the best is still not getting us what we want. So you have to know, you tried facilitated IEP, you tried the CPAC, don't ever give up if you know and feel with your whole heart it's something that is best for your kid and your child needs. You can go onto iChamp and you can file a complaint. You can file for mediation. You can file for due process. I have a handout over there with different resources and things. So you want to look at Article 7. You want to look at IDEA, and then you want to also look at the federal regs. So there are three key things when you're looking, in your special education. You have IDEA, you have Article 7, and you have your federal regulations. So those are all three things that you can go back to and say, no, what does the law say? I know a lot of people are intimidated by mediation and due process and filing those complaints because they feel that something's going to be taken out on your child, but that should never be the case. Don't let that. And then another thing too, don't let money stop you from doing what you feel is best. There's services out there. The Joseph Naley Foundation is phenomenal with, if you do go to mediation and due process and helping, with the lawyers and things, the Department of Indiana Disability. There's so many resources out there that don't let money be your determining factor in not advocating for your child and trying to get what they want. Try all the avenues first, but if you really still feel in your heart as a parent that you're not getting the appropriate supports for your children, don't stop. You as a parent know what's best. And if you still feel you're not being heard, then ask other parents, look at other routes, see what other avenues that you can take to get what you think your child needs and what they deserve. And that's what all the teams do. We all work together, but sometimes it's just, you have to go that route no matter what. And it's okay. Nobody wants to do that, We don't want to spend the time, we don't want to spend those resources or the money. But sometimes it's just, that's your last resort and you have to do it. And I mean, I would do it all over again if I had to. It was phenomenal for the boys. But you know, those are all decisions, but you have to talk to other parents, but never stop advocating for your child and getting what you feel is going to be best for them, within the school district, within, just in life in general. And never let money be that stopper for you in trying to get what, you know, you feel your child deserves or that you want for your kiddo.
So Tender and I left information about CPAC here at the table. So if anybody's interested in, you know, do I have a CPAC in my school district, or how do I get one started? We can be a resource for that too.
And some states do require it.
Yes,
Indiana
okay.
does not. Some states do require every district to
Wow.
have that. So long-term goal, hopefully Indiana will be one of those states.
Working on that too.
But currently it is not, but some states do require that. So, you know, if you have questions, you can look at Indiana, but also research other surrounding states and what their requirements are for that parent advisory council within those states. There's a CPAC guide. If you Google CPAC, you can find that guide online. It's all right there. You can
I
find
can send that link for
Okay.
the resource page. I guess we should have done that. We put our
Yeah.
webpage on there because we just launched a webpage for our CPAC, but
Uh-huh.
the advocacy and action guide would be a great tool for
Yeah.
for parents to have as well if they're looking at joining the CPAC or starting
We're
one.
starting one, yeah.
Yeah.
And InSource is phenomenal with helping us get it started.
Yes.
We work
Lisa's
together
pretty
a lot.
cool. Yeah, and I did a training last year with you
Yes.
guys, and
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'm always
So,
happy to,
InSource
yeah,
is-
send them my way. I answer lots of questions, and if I don't know the answers, I'll be happy to find it. So I tell families that sometimes I do get stopper sometimes. I'll have that one person that said, they said this, and it's like, I gotta look into that. Yeah, because sometimes the schools do like to kind of, you know, and I say sometimes, I think sometimes too, it's just a lack of education. And I don't mean that disrespectful to anyone, but sometimes when you're talking to some of those teachers and you're talking to some of those administrations, they really just don't understand the special education process. And so that's why I always say, you know, I'm happy to come to meetings. I'm happy to sit there with you to talk it through and let's figure it out, because that happens a lot that you, and then unfortunately, like I just talked to a special education director today, you have a lot of turnover in principals and assistant principals. And
Yeah.
that's becoming very difficult because like you're saying, you're trying to develop these relationships and people aren't staying 10 to 15, 20 years at an elementary anymore. You know, they're just not, they're bouncing around and that makes it difficult. But, you know, like you said, just every year, know who those people are. Get out there and talk to them and help them understand who your child is. And it's okay to send an IEP to a teacher. Like I tell families, if you want to email what you got, you can email it to them because absolutely, because that's another way to communicate, because sometimes families say, well, that teacher doesn't even know. You know, and I hear it a lot with specials, when kids go to specials, music, art, library, they don't know. And so they should, absolutely, they should. They should.
Now they have a document called IEP at a glance. I'm not sure when that rolled, but I just discovered it last year.
It's been there forever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
It's not always used.
well, it wasn't
Yeah.
used, my son was so little that maybe they just didn't need to use it yet, but now that he's getting some more services and he's older, there was an IEP at a glance that I was like, oh, and so that is what you can push out
Yeah,
With the
too.
specials.
Yeah.
into IAs
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, it's hard for families too, because if you're asking for an IEP, it's different than asking for an educational evaluation. And that's where sometimes the schools like to like I said, play the dumb card a little bit, because it's a process. And so, you know, an educational evaluation is what you're asking for. You're not asking for an IEP. So if I get phone calls sometimes where families say, my child just got diagnosed with ASD. I need to figure out what I need to do with the school. So I ask them, how is that affecting them at school? That's the first question you have to ask, because just because the diagnosis is there, and just because the doctor's telling you they need an IEP, That doesn't mean you're gonna go in tomorrow and it's gonna magically appear. So I always say to families, how is it impacting their education? Are you just looking for accommodations? Do you want minutes? Do you want goals? You know, that's the conversation you have to have. And then if you're just saying that you went to the teacher and told her, I want an IEP, if it's not in writing, the conversation probably never happened. And that's unfortunate, but that's just sometimes how it happens. So I tell families, if you're at that point, put it in writing, and you're asking for an educational evaluation is what you're asking for. You're asking for a process that will lead you to maybe an IEP or a 504.
So that's the first step, is that
Absolutely.
educational assessment
Yes.
to get to, okay.
Yes.
makes
Even
sense.
if they've had an outside evaluation,
Mhm.
it doesn't necessarily cover the same
It doesn't.
things.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's because school will tell you sometimes they didn't focus on school. So we
Yeah.
need to see academically what's
Mhm.
going on there. And that's what I hear a lot of times is that, but I always say, share everything you have.
Mhm.
Don't try and be like, I'm gonna hold it back because I wanna see what they come up with and then see what I have. I say, put it out there, put it out there to them and provide them. And if you have support that can come to your meetings, invite anybody, invite therapists, invite family members, whoever can be a part of that discussion. Yeah, invite resource. We'll be happy to come.
Schools are happy when a
Yes.
source comes to a meeting,
Yeah.
which is very different than if it were an advocate
Right.
coming in, that they feel like they're gonna be under attack. They don't feel that way. They
Because they
feel
have a relationship. with you.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
With the whole organization.
Yeah, because we try and spend our summers, because special ed directors work in the summers too. We try and use the summer as a time to just kind of rapport and kind of look back on the year and say, hey, how can we can improve? Maybe there's some areas here that, because we had an instance last year, a school did not allow a facilitated IEP and they did not allow mediation. And so we spent the summer talking about that to say that's a problem if you're not going to work the process with the family. And so we do spend a lot of time in the summer trying to work on those relationships. But we'll go in there and we'll test them, and that's okay. That's kind of what it's for. And we do notify them ahead of time now. So that is something that we do. And it's out of respect to just say, I'll be at a meeting Friday at 9:00 at this building, but I never say names, whoever, they can figure it out. And sometimes they'll send and say, is there anything I need to know ahead of time? And I say, no, everything's good, because that's not my place, to kind of start a conversation if you do have a concern or something. So that's something new. And we have great volunteers. We have some families that have stepped up to become volunteers, and they do help families go to meetings and support them as well. So, yeah.
Just to kind of piggyback on what you guys were talking about with all the turnover, one of the trainings that we added on this year is what administrators need to know about special ed.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've been doing this on the regular here in Indianapolis and in Merrillville and in Jeffersonville. Get a lot of attendance down south, but the service centers that are around the state kind of signed on and said, we want it all over the state. And I think I'm doing like 4 days worth of training in various parts of the state over the next couple of weeks. So,
Nice.
and it really is targeted towards principals and directors and assistant principals who need to know at least enough to not make mistakes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
About the whole process.
Or just the changes that have happened. I
Exactly.
feel like,
Exactly.
they've done it for so long, they don't even know all of the current updated changes that have happened. They're still going by what was 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, there's a lot of very
And so there's a lot
administration.
of changes that I feel like a lot of people
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I think behaviors is really becoming very high in a lot of schools, and there's a line there. You have to. There's discipline, but there's also a line there where, like, if it isn't the disability, and if it is, like you're saying, that's
Train
where.
on that.
Yeah, that's where. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
where some of that education would be beneficial for some of these administrators to understand.
And as a parent, I relied heavily on in-source modules and trainings. And then I found IEP Technical Assistance Center modules and trainings. Some of them are just virtual. You can do it at your own speed. Some of them you go, like I'm going to the Improving Outcomes for All in November with the IEP Technical Assistance Center. It's an inclusion conference. It's like a training conference. I'm super
Elevating
excited.
it.
Yeah.
Yes, elevating it.
Yeah. So basically, if you just go to InSource, the website and the IEP Technical Center website, you can see all the different trainings. And even though you're a parent and not a teacher, you're the teacher at home. You know, you need to understand your child's disability and how it affects their education so that you can share this information. So it's really cool that it's, you know, there are trainings that are for teachers and parents that are just right there at your fingertips to go to. Yeah.
And I also encourage parents, like if you have a specialist, if you have, you know, an autism specialist or Down syndrome specialist, utilize those resources. Like Cincinnati has a phenomenal education specialist. So if your school doesn't seem to be truly we don't expect everybody to know every single diagnosis and what there is. So utilize your specialist and pull that information in. Ask them, hey, do you have an education specialist within your department? And then you can also present that to the school and say, hey, I understand, you know, these things may be happening. Hey, we have they have a specialist within the Down syndrome clinic that really can help us figure out these behaviors or figure out modifying this work. We can't expect the schools to know everything there is about the diagnosis. So definitely utilize your medical professionals and pull them in and ask if they have an education specialist within that program and try and team them up with the schools. So that way our kiddos can get the best supports in the best way possible throughout that whole school year.
I started calling myself the general contractor of my son's IEP. That's my new title for myself. Because like Tendra was just saying, that reminded me of that when you were saying that, like, we have the, you know, the vision of the whole thing. So, you know, we've got outpatient, we've got, you know, special medical centers, you know, that we can go to. We have all these things where we pull it together for the school team. So I like to make sure that I'm kind of keeping everybody organized and keeping information flowing. And the teams appreciate it. They do really love that. And it is a part of building the rapport too.
Yeah.
Because then I'm not always saying something negative. I'm saying way more positive things than I would be saying anything that is a problem that I need solved.
Just one other piece of advice to parents, if your child is not already identified, I think a lot of parents will have a child, especially, I see this most often with parents of children with autism who are very strong academically and are told, no special ed because your child is doing fine academically, and that's not the way the law reads. You could have academic issues, or you could have deficits in functional performance, like social skills, behavior, motor skills, you know, all of the rest of the package. And if the deficits are strong enough to need special education support, then your child could still qualify. So I think a lot of school people will say, well, look at the iLearn scores, look at the iRead scores, things are fine. We don't even need to evaluate. Well, sometimes we do.
Well, and like you're saying, and if they say no, I always tell families, just because they say no doesn't mean your stuff
That's the end of
stops.
the road.
That's not, and that's exactly what I tell them. You have the right to go to mediation. And I tell them that you go on Department of Education and you can file mediation. And that's what I would say. Don't take no for an answer if you truly feel there's more going on. And you're right, functional is becoming very heavily now that we are trying
With
to
the
look at
behavior,
that.
especially.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
And another diagnosis I feel that's kind of brushed a little bit by the wayside, I will say, is dyslexia dysgraphia. So if you feel as a parent that your child has that early on, talk to somebody. You know, let's look at those scores and where the deficits are as far as, hey, they're doing great here, but wait, let's look at this score. So dyslexia dysgraphia, I feel like gets pushed a lot of times under that rug, but don't wait. Especially if it's hereditary, you know, kindergarten, first grade, grab that, get those supports early on. You know, fifth grade becomes harder when you finally are just starting to get those supports. So if you have any suspicion early on, talk to, you know, some of the different resources, some of the different parents, you know, utilize those Facebook groups just to find those supports, and then approach the school, you know, and ask them, hey, I really need you know, someone to help me out with this. I really need to look at this in depth instead of just, well, they say it's okay, or test scores. Yeah, but let's look at this and this. So, you know, advocate. If you think it, speak up. Parents really, truly do know their child the best.
Are there questions?
I have a question. Diane,
Okay, so I've used InSource before, and I always tell parents that, like a lot, like you said, a lot of parents like just don't know, they just have no idea. So we say like contact your InSource rep, and you go online and there's like, based on like your county, and your district. And the one parent that I did refer, he contacted our county person for our district and they never contacted him.
Okay.
And then I said, well, that happened to me too. So I contacted somebody else and that person helped me. So he contacted that person and she didn't contact him. So to this day that he's never gotten contacted. It's been like 3 weeks, I think.
Okay.
So I don't, like, I want to.
I can give you my card and like that way we can, do you know what school?
HSE, it's Sand Creek Elementary in HSE district.
Okay.
He actually, it's Lincoln's dad. I don't know. Yes. So I actually was texting with him. I was like, "Do you know about the in-service?" Like so I sent him the links. I don't know if he's going to try to log in towards the end. But
And I can tell you too that we started something new too, and I'll be honest, I am not a social media kind of person, but we have a lady that works for us that she kind of like our Facebook page, like there's certain times during the day you can go on there and she's on there. So like she's on there and so you can ask questions there. And so maybe like that, you know, if he's struggling to kind of get it, or I always tell people it's not an 800 number anymore. We got rid of our 800 number, but whatever our office number is for the main office, call there, because what happens is you call there and it becomes a ticket. So we have a ticket. So someone's answering it and they're kind of taking information, they're putting that all in. So then it gets pulled into our system and then it's there. So we have 24 hours to respond to that person. So if we don't respond to them now, sometimes we're trying to just call or we're emailing or trying to do that. And so I always text. I'll admit, I have some families I'm trying to track down right now. and it's just how it goes. But if he's struggling with it, that's definitely, they can call our main office because like I said, then they generate a ticket.
Oh, yeah,
And then
he just
that
popped
way
up.
That ticket needs to be reviewed and looked
Yeah.
at and, you know, kind of helped with, but yeah, and I'll give you my information too.
Oh, okay, great.
So,
Yeah, there he is.
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah, he was like, I'm looking for something on the end. So I was like,
Oh, that's
oh,
good. Yeah, no.
sorry.
He's gonna know you're talking about him.
Yeah, that's what I would ask if he wasn't able to.
Because I will tell you that sometimes, like, you know, online, like our phone numbers are there, our emails are there. And so like I said, it's just on us at that point. Like we need to reach back out to you. We need to kind of have those emails and kind of have that conversation. But like I said, if you're, you know, sending emails and there's not a response, or you're, you know, trying to call me directly, because my phone number's on there directly on the website, and you're just not here, I always say, go back to the main office, go back to that main number. And
So then the people that are doing this, is this their main job or do they have, like, is this a
no,
volunteer?
this is our job.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But I will tell you that we have a lot of part-time.
Okay.
We have, because like I said, a lot of them are parents themselves.
Right.
And so, and InSource, when it was started, it was just all part-time. And even my supervisor, she's been there 9 years, and she said it's only been in like the last 4 years that they actually started even having full-time positions. So, but like even on the team that I'm on, there's 5 of us on the team. There's only 3 of us that are full-time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the others are part-time. And so sometimes that does make it a little bit harder, you know, but that's where we have that system to where, you know, somebody's out, we're covering each other, and we should be covering each other. Now, if, you know, I'm covering for my coworker that's in Fort Wayne and there's a meeting, I'm not going to go to that. You know, I mean, that's not how they kind of want us to do that. But we can give information, we can help support. And then when it comes time for that meeting, then we say, this is the person you need to make sure knows about that so they can help.
And I thought I read, you said, so InSource is grant funded.
Yes.
So, so then it's like by our like taxes and our, like how, like what's the grant?
There's all kinds of them. Yeah.
Oh,
Mainly
federal.
federal. Yeah.
So it's kind of like one of those where you tell people like, you're paying for this, like.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
Yes,
yeah.
and it's free, and as we tell people, we're free, like we are a free service. Now, sometimes when you go to an advocate, they're gonna charge you for that, you know, and like I said, it depends on who you're wanting, you know, to be a part of that, you know, situation. But no, we tell people that we're free a free service to you, And, you know, and like I said, if we're not doing our job, then, you know, make sure that somebody knows that. Because, you know, we definitely want to help every family that we can. And like I said, I will say there, you know, we're in a lot of meetings. We do a lot of travel. We do some things like that. And so sometimes I'll tell families, if I can call you while I'm driving, I'll do it. You know, now I may have to follow up with you in an email to get more information for our system. But, you know, if families are okay with that, you know, we like to do that because then that way we can get to them faster. But, and you know, and we don't have like somebody needs a 5:30 call, we'll do a 5:30 call. We just have to know, you know, so we can make sure.
So do you guys suggest before we go, so you, from my understanding, you can call an IEP meeting anytime, like throughout the year. So like my issue right now is I think my daughter's not being challenged enough in her self-contained classroom. So I asked the teacher her thoughts about it and what my thoughts were like, hey, look, I want her to be challenged, and do I wait to see if she makes those changes, or do I automatically ask for an IEP meeting to make sure that's in, like, you know, one example is like, I want her to be in a more minutes in a gen ed class, to see how she does. Or do we test that first to see if she is appropriate in that class before we make the change in IEP meeting where it's like a for sure thing? Like, do we give that teacher a chance? Because I feel like that's just kind of general, communication with your teacher before just being like, oh, we'll do an IEP meeting. Like, do many parents do that, or like what is the recommendation there?
Do you want me to answer? I'll be happy to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so when you're looking at education, like sounds like right now she's in like a general or a special ed class all day long. Okay, so you're looking at a least restrictive environment is kind of what you're at. And so the state wants your daughter to be in general education. That's the top. So it's 80% or more, they're in general ed. Then it goes to about 49. Then we go into a classroom. So that's kind of where that conversation probably needs to start, is we may need to relook and revisit that least restrictive environment and kind of have a conversation about that. Because if you go the next one up, you're going to about 50%. And you know, a lot of times they start with lunch, specials, recess, you know, just general things like that to kind of push them in and kind of get them started. But if she's not even doing some of that, that's a great way to have that
She did that
conversation.
last year.
Okay.
And so then this year, my question was more, she's in first grade. I'm like, they should be learning things instead of just being like circle time and things like that. Like, I want her to learn like alphabet.
So that's a great thing to say. Can we start pushing in during some of those times? Let's look at that. You know, can we start the day in there so we could do circle time and learn about, you know, the weather and the day and, you know, those kind of things, which is a lot of times sometimes what they do at the beginning of the day. But that's a great conversation to have with her. But if it's going to be a trial and error and you kind of feel like you're not getting, that's when I would go back to that least restrictive and say, we need to have a conversation about that, because right now where she's at, they can kind of keep her in that area, you know, but if they're starting to kind of want to do more, then
so as long as they're like in agreement and they're being like open, like, oh yeah, we'll do this, then I feel like sounds like I could just go that route for now. It doesn't sound like
I wouldn't for very long.
Right.
Okay.
Because most districts are not going to make a change like that permanently unless it gets changed on the IEP, because they're going to be worried about not giving her the minutes they promised you in special ed.
Yeah.
So if you have that good conversation and say, how about for the next 2 weeks, we try this? And then we can, you know, if you think it's going well, let's meet, let's make that change.
Yeah.
on the document.
I think I like
Kind
that.
of hold them to something a little bit. Don't, like she's saying, just don't let them just kind of, because if not, like I said, it might sound great and then it's going to fall off, because like she's saying, you have minutes in there that they're still trying to get in.
Right.
And at some point they may have to change those around.
Well, and if she's going to ask for like the next 2 weeks of trial to push in like at a certain time, and maybe you decide what that subject is. Is it reading? Is it math? What do you feel like her strengths are? But then would you say that maybe if they're going to push in for circle time and a little bit of phonics in the morning, would they want to collect any data?
And
how do you? So then how do you
what
as
we
a
do?
parent recommend what they do to collect, so that at the end of the 2 weeks you can look back and see how it went?
And maybe it's not even recommending, it's just asking that question. So what data will you be collecting so we'll know whether this is going well or not?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because then Nobody gets their
Throw the
feelings.
ball
in the
Or, you know,
Exactly.
toward over,
Yes,
you know.
yeah, and we
Yeah.
don't want to act like we're teachers. We're not. We're parents.
Yeah.
But we've
But you still
learned.
need to get
We're-
the
we're-
work accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're making a great point. You're saying I want her challenged.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I think that's a great way to kind of start that conversation. You know, I want to see that challenge, you know, and I want to see that for her.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
literally told the teacher that today, so I'm like,
Yeah.
this is the perfect time.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't want to take all the questions. I see that someone has.
Yeah, Megan and John have a question.
Okay, so what we're dealing with right now, oh man, this is echoing.
Yeah, I can't change it. Sorry.
I don't know if I'll be able to talk with an echo, but the school nurse, our newest kiddo that we're adopting, has a non-accidental TBI. She's 3, nonverbal, has vision problems, not rolling, not sitting, on a G-tube. So we were getting her registered for school and we were doing her IEP. And since I have 2 kiddos in a wheelchair on feeding tubes, I found a nurse. And they said the nurse can come to school with her. And then the school nurse called me last week and said, if Ella's nurse is not present with her at school, she's not allowed to come. So I said, no, you cannot deny her of an education. She's supposed to get services as PT, OT, speech, and the blind and low vision services, and you cannot deny her. And they said, well, it comes back to training. I said, well, explain the training to me. And they said about the feeding tube and seizures. And I told her, you have a classroom full of neurodiverse children. You should already be trained, and you can't put that back on me and my child. So she backtracked and she said, let me talk to the director of Covered Bridge, which is like our special education, and I'll get back to you. So she didn't get back to me. I called and I talked to the director and she was like, it's fine. We got it trained. Ella can go to school without her nurse. Well, then, of course, I didn't stop talking because that really irritated me. And it frustrates me because I'm sure other parents go through this. And just like last year, they were trying to deny Hollis of being on her feed. And I'm sure parents just say, okay, well, that's the rule. I'll just take them off the feed or they won't come to school that day. So then the director was like, yes, I agree with you. That comment should have never been made, but I'm not promising you once she gets in elementary school, but that comment's not going to come up again because that's the rule. And I said, well, you don't even know my child. She was physically abused. Not only does she need the nurse medically, but she needs her emotionally. And so then I called the executive director of Covered Bridge and left a message with her and haven't got a call back. But I feel like maybe I should have an advocate. And I told them, I said, I'm not going to give up. If I have to hire a lawyer, I'll hire a lawyer, but you're not going to deny them because I feel like you're discriminating against my child. And so I'm just really irritated. And I don't know if I need to have an advocate with me for the future. I feel like I'm a pretty good advocate / mama bear on my own.
Yes. Yeah.
But I told the director, I said, don't come at me with this kind of stuff because I guarantee you I'm going to fight you tooth and nail for these kids. And so she just kept apologizing. But it makes me mad for other parents and other foster parents that are dealing with DCS and sibling visits and everything that's involved with that they don't have any left in them to fight the school system.
Once you have medically complex kiddos, then it's a tiresome fight. It truly is, unfortunately.
And that is one of the reasons why we started our CPAC too. And a lot of the parents that joined our council and the teachers too, when we ask them, why do you want to be on a parent advisory council where you're not just talking about your kid, but you're talking about the district. We're talking about systemic issues and things. We're not talking about individual stuff when we do our parent advisory meetings. But they all said, it's because I've walked this walk and I've made mistakes or I didn't know things and I want to do better for the people that are coming after me. And that's what I hear you saying as well. So I just wanted to say that. And, you know, if there's not a CPAC going in your district, you would probably be a great parent lead.
And Megan, you can, we can share my contact information too. I'd be happy. I kind of walked in that same shoes a little bit with that in our district and still am walking in that with a little bit. So I'd be happy to talk to you and share resources and ideas. And I'm sure InSource, I mean, they can help provide some of the legal side of things, but I walked in that and still am a little bit because we do have medically complex kiddos that are beyond, more medically complex beyond the looks or the diagnosis.
When then there's all these extra rules and policies that go with that. Then yeah.
I think
Well, that's why I wanted to make sure that they're not going to be like, oh my gosh, here's Megan Schmidt again. And let's just say you can't have a nurse at all because I'm so sick of dealing with this mom. And I don't, obviously, like you said, I don't want them to, I don't think they would like take it out on my kids per se. Her teacher is great, but it still just makes me aggravated that that even was a thought that they could come to me and say like, hey, she can't have an education if your nurse is sick for that day, or if your nurse is flaky and calls off. Like, how is that okay to tell a parent?
That happened to me 3 years ago, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because if he didn't have a nurse, he couldn't be in developmental preschool, is what they told me.
But you all were
And
providing this nurse,
We were
right?
providing
So
the nurse.
If you're providing a nurse, you run the battle of, will the school let an outside person in, right? But if they feel that a nurse has to be there in order for your child to be there, they should be providing the
Yeah,
nurse.
and it should be on your IEP.
Well,
I mean, it
yeah.
should be a part of your minutes. And so, you know, like she's saying, if they're, you know, stepping in and saying that's what the team recognizes as what they need, and it's on the minutes, they have to provide it, you
I
know,
think there's
and
just sometimes that parents are, maybe it's not part of the
I
IEP.
think that
I trust this person.
yes,
You know?
and I would say give it, you
I
know.
think that's where we're struggling.
Sometimes they're trying to put them back on the families to find the nurses.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because she doesn't like, the school can handle her needs. Like, out of both my kids, she's probably less medically complex, but I want a nurse because I need help at home, and no nurse is going to work a split shift, and she goes to school 12 to 2:30. So where, yes, the school could probably handle her needs, I also want someone there emotionally for her. So it's just been like kind of this uphill battle that we're starting, I guess.
And that's the issue that we handle. The school said, well, we can. I'm like, no, I need my private duty nurse. They come before school, they come after school, they do respite on the weekends. I can't give up my private duty nurse for you to hire one. So you know, those are challenges. I was not and still haven't given up my private duty nurse. But on the days that that private duty nurse is, my child should still be able to come to school.
Parents sometimes run into the same issue on a kind of a milder level where the schools might say, your child can't go on the field trip unless you come because they have seizures, they have medical needs. No, the law says your child is entitled to go with everyone else. And if they need certain supports, we have to, as a school, figure out how to provide those for that field trip or that convocation or the basketball team. You know, if you have a child that's deaf and they need an ASL interpreter and they make the team and based on skill and they need an interpreter during practices or games, school has to provide it.
How do you get past like staff shortages? That's like everywhere. So
You struggle.
how do you do?
And find it, you say, hey, I have this person, you just need to hire them.
Oh.
But I think
Yeah,
that's
the way I
that's not
found
your
it.
child, and I
Yeah.
hate to say it's not your child's problem.
Yeah.
And they have a plan for a reason. A team agreed to that, and so the school needs to help make that work for them.
So Hamilton Southeastern is notorious for not allowing one-on-ones because of the shortage. My kid doesn't eat, walk, or talk on her own. And they said she doesn't need a one-on-one, but we'll always have an adult like me with her. So I allowed it this time because I want her to get used to other adults being with her, which was fine with
Which is a
me.
good thing.
Yes,
And not
but-
just one person.
Exactly,
yeah.
but they specifically would not write
Right,
one-on-one in the
That's
IEP.
pretty common.
It is pretty.
Even
Okay.
if they're getting
Yeah.
one-on-one,
Okay,
they'll put access to an adult at all times.
Yeah. They don't like the word one-on-one anymore. Yeah, yeah, they don't like that.
Maybe
And I
it's
think
too-
sometimes, I always say it's because they think we're
Yeah.
one-on-one all day.
yeah,
And it's really not a one-on-one all day. It could be maybe 3 or 4 different people, you know, so that's why I would say, go back to your minutes. See what your minutes are.
mine is more so like safety, like if something were to happen, they need to get her out, the other
Yeah.
kids can walk and
Yeah.
run and things like that.
I call it individual time. That's kind of the word I try and encourage families to use. You know, she needs individual time. She needs that one person to be able, like you say, to get her where she needs to be or the support she needs. Yeah.
And then that kind of goes back to my last question for you guys, like if she were to go to a gen ed class and get more minutes, she would need somebody, so then
I
it's
put
like,
one-on-one. The boys are in gen ed, they both have a one-on-one all day.
yeah, so then it's like,
I
do I-
request for that
That's a push-in.
one-on-one,
So you're asking for a push-in service. Yeah, you're asking for somebody to help push in with her.
okay.
And the way the law's written, that should happen with an additional aid or support in gen ed if it works, prior to thinking about pulling a kid out to a special class.
Yeah.
It really should.
You should push in before you pull out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like Hamilton Southeastern, again, the teachers are told that they follow what the admins tell them, that's their boss. They're not gonna tell the parents, oh, your kid needs a one-on-one.
Right.
What's with, like, is that the same with other districts where the teachers are just basically told not to tell the parents what they think, like that? I feel like they're not being very like transparent, like what you guys were talking about earlier, like.
I just had somebody from Westfield comment on how that they were very appreciative of what CPAC was doing for their district as.
So this was a teacher,
This
right?
was a teacher
That's
that
a staff.
a staff that told me how very appreciative as a teacher they were of what CPAC is doing. So I would say sometimes teachers are just as frustrated
Yeah, I
as,
feel like the teachers
as
have
parents are.
The teachers
Because
know, like,
of-
have their kids' best interest in mind, but
Yeah.
admins, that they're running a business, they're running a
And
company.
so that's where, you know, I encourage all these schools to try and start an advisory council or get something put into place so you can address systemic issues like that. Otherwise, it's gonna continually be the same, because it's easy. They already know. It's easy to keep doing what you already know how to do.
And a school district is a top-down organization. So when you understand that that is how information comes from the US Department of Education, it comes to the Indiana Department of Education, it's disseminated out to the school district administrators who then implement it through the teachers. So it is, it's government. So when you understand that is how information flows, that's just the system and how it works. And that's how it is. There's so many good benefits to that. Things are organized, you know, there's a process, there's a chain of command to follow. So what CPAC does is it brings in that collaborative piece. It brings the teachers and the administrators to the table with the parents, and we have conversations when the heat is off the burner, you know. But then also, like Tendra and I, when we entered our school district, we got to know our superintendent. We got to know our special education director. And then through that is how we created CPAC. But even getting to know those administrators, finding ways to volunteer in your school system is a great tip. It's hard. I work full time.
Yeah.
But I still I'm room parent this year.
PTO, I mean, even if you can't do everything with PTO, do some things.
And it's just to get to know your building.
Get
You
more familiar with
you get
those
to know
within
your
building.
principal and your assistant principal that way. If you
Plus they get to
participate
know you.
in PTO.
Plus they get to know you and your compassion and, you know.
Show up to parent-teacher conferences,
Yeah.
even though you're already going to IEP meetings. Make sure that you are getting the benefit and your child is getting the benefit of things that everybody else is too. And that's one of those typical things. It's just regular parent-teacher conferences with any teacher.
Because the administrators are people and they are in this business because they care about kids too. But when they know you and they understand, you know, what's going on with your child, then you know they're going to, you know, have more compassion and understand. And sometimes it literally is that they don't quite understand it because they don't see it at that level. Teachers are probably communicating things, but they might be communicating them within meetings, you know, different things. And so sometimes hearing it from the parent too can open up someone's eyes and help them make a change that you need to see happen.
Some of those blanket policies and, you know, the language that certain people will use, like we don't do one-on-one aids or things like that, have come from not a place of, you know, bad intent, but of overusing. Everybody's getting an aid. It's like being on Oprah, you know, and not everybody needs an aid, right? But kids who are going to run need to have somebody with them. Kids who can't do things for themselves need to have someone with them. Somebody who's a safety risk, medical needs. And those are different situations. So just make your voice heard.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions on Teams? No?
And I'll make sure.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Tony.
Hey, my name is Antonio Spiker. I adopted our son when he was 2. He has CDLS, microcephaly, and he's been diagnosed with ADHD. And it's super rare, and I'm having problems getting him the services that he needs because he doesn't need a feeding tube. And a lot of people don't understand what CDLS is, and then I explain it to them, and they say I don't qualify for it. He's a safety risk, and I want to get him a one-on-one. I've been trying to get him a one-on-one. I've been trying to get him services. He gets speech and OT, but I don't think he's getting OT at school. I emailed and I haven't got a reply yet. But my question is, I need someone to help me. Diane's been super helpful with giving me information, and I've been trying to do the work and call these people, but he needs me around the clock. I'm with him because of safety. He doesn't understand that things can hurt him. He's a climber, he's a jumper. He'll climb things and then jump off of it, and doesn't really. Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. He doesn't understand that he can hurt himself really bad. And I truly think that he's not being pushed enough at school. I've taught him his ABCs, his colors, how to count, how to spell his name. But he's going to a new school this year, and he's coming back with things like they played in a circle, they sung songs, but I'm not seeing the other things that I'm working on at home. And I don't want him to get left behind. His geneticist said that his CDLS is super rare, and that if we put in the time and the work, he will eventually catch up with the other kids. So I quit my job to teach him, and I just don't understand how I can force them to help me, because my husband teaches in the school district, and I don't want him to get the backlash
Mhm.
from it.
If you've got an in, if your husband's in the system, that can be a good thing.
And it also can be a bad thing because
Yeah.
I don't want them to take it out on him for me fighting so hard for the services that Lincoln needs. But he needs a one-on-one. He needs someone there to guide him. He's in a class with 14 kids right now, and there's only 2 people, and one of the A is with him constantly when I come there and look. And I just, Lincoln, I just don't want him to hurt himself too bad. Bumps and bruises, I'm fine with, but I'm scared that he's going to break something or hurt himself really badly. And
So
I'm trying.
would he be in kindergarten next year?
Yes, he will be in kindergarten. And I'm trying, they told me that they want to send him to a special ed school because that's what he needs. And I said, no, that's not the plans for him. I wanted him to go to a regular school to be challenged, to get his services, pull him out of class, give him his services, and work that way. But they are fighting me to send him to special ed school next year. And I don't want to do that.
With you.
Mhm.
I mean, I really think it would be a benefit to have another person there with you to help you kind of walk through the process.
Okay.
So somebody from InSource would be a good person to connect with.
And it sounds like you've tried to maybe contact somebody from InSource and you haven't had luck. So I'm gonna make sure she has my information and email me and call me or whatever, and I'll make sure you get the right person through InSource.
Okay.
You have that liaison, because like I was saying to her, it might be a question of what is his eligibility, and the one that he has, is it appropriate? You know, that's a conversation I think that could be maybe looked at, to maybe look at some of the other categories of eligibility to see, and that might be a place to start. And then you're talking about, again, the least restricted environment. You know, he has a right to least restricted environment. That's where we want all the kids. The state wants the kids there too. So, but I'll make sure she has all my information and she can get it to you. And it has my phone number, it has my email, and you can text me at that number too. But we'll make sure. And if you're okay with it, I can even get his information from you. It's all right with that. Like, I'm okay with that.
Yes.
You guys want, but I'll make sure. Either way I leave, I'll have either your information or she'll have mine to get to you. So,
Perfect.
Kendra, I'm gonna call you about the waiver stuff too.
Oh, okay.
We talked about it last year when we were here, and then
Yes.
about it. And then, especially get you switched over since you're staying home, especially now.
Yes.
So I'll call you. I have your information still.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
If you have other questions, send them.
Send them.
And
Yeah. Send them to me.
And we'll
Yep.
keep resources and information and all of that stuff here.
Cool.
And I think, just so I know, you're always welcoming people even outside of your school district to come to trainings. So keep that in mind too, because it is a wonderful organization and they do some great things and they have some good training. So if you can ever attend anything that they have, you know, I encourage it.
We're starting to promote that on social media now, like when we're having parent events and things like that. Yes.
Yeah.
We're still forming the bones of like who we are and what our role is, like as parents and staff on the, but then we also are doing those education events too, like we did last time.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Cool. All right.
And Megan, I'll make sure they give you my contact information or we can exchange it somehow too.
Okay, that sounds good. And then as far as like following the training and you're talking about on social media, what should I be following on social media to find it?
Yeah, Yeah, Westfield Moms, I push it out on Westfield Moms, or we should just friend each other on Facebook, because I'll put it on my own page.
Okay, that'd be great.
You know what, just, I'll get your email and, I'll add you to the invite list. So you can
Okay.
just come to a meeting, yeah. And then you'll be on the
Okay,
list.
I'll try to like put it in the chat.
Okay.
We are starting to
Alright.
do some training modules with InSource on how other parents and other school districts can start CPAC. So that's coming down the pike too. That's getting created. Then that'll come out through InSource.
I know. Lisa keeps attaching me all this stuff. I'm like, you need to tell me about it ahead of time.
Yeah, sign up for the,
Michelle got into that group, and I'm not sure how, but I'm okay with that.
I probably looped you in.
It's okay, I don't mind.
You're mine.
But Lisa's
And
kind of
Megan, I probably have yours, because you're with Guardian Care, right?
Well, and signing up for the
don't think
InSource.
she heard
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I have your contact information, and so I'll message you
Yeah.
about that.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
And then, yeah, Megan went ahead and put her
You got it.
email and her
And you have
Facebook
it?
up here. So,
Yes. Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Then I'll add you to my parent list on. Yeah.
sounds good. All right. Well, thanks you guys for joining us. And yeah, just email me and I'll kind of pass along any other questions you guys have. And yeah, hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is he okay with you giving?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because then I'll just have you write it on a piece of paper here. Because then I'll find out who it is and then I'll just make sure, because it sounds like if he's tried to talk before, then I'll just make sure a couple others are attached to the email, you know, to make sure that it's kind of, yeah. Because.
Kendra, I'll just send you an email or
And then I'll
a
make sure I get a
text
hold of him and then.
to get
To Megan.
Megan.